Many preppers are feeling a need to become more self-sufficient by starting a little homestead. We have our own little homestead here where we grow chickens and rabbits and all kinds of food. Well, today our special guests are Dennis and Michal, who have jumped off the homesteading cliff and have lived to tell about it. Hey, Provident Preppers, I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Colleen, and today we have a special treat for you. We have Dennis and Michal, who are homesteaders who've figured out how to do it all right. Now, a couple of things that I love that they've done is not only do they have an amazing functioning homestead, but they've also built an amazing community, which, as you know, is so very important. So, Dennis and Michal, why don't you introduce yourselves to our audience?
Well, I've been married for 43 years, and from our early marriage, we always wanted to have a place out in the country. You might say out in the woods. Michal's a huge animal lover, and I like them too, but not as much as Michal. And we've always been strong doers and capable of doing just about anything. So this was kind of our dream to live out in the country. So
yeah, we jumped off into the homesteading world after having lived all of our life in the suburbs of big cities. And we decided to just sell everything and move to 30 acres in the middle of nowhere on land that had never been lived on before. So it was a huge challenge. But our goal was to become as self-sustaining as possible. And so we have slowly worked our way closer and closer to that goal. Wouldn't say we're 100% there, but every year we try to get a little closer.
You guys are so brave. You're so
very brave, and you're really living the dream. I think there are so many people that would love to do what you have done and achieve that goal, but it doesn't come without a lot of pain and lessons. And sometimes knowing what not to do is just as important as knowing what to do. And so today we're excited to hear you talk about some of the things that didn't go so well, so that people can learn from that and maybe not go into it with their eyes quite as shut as sometimes they do. And so we are so excited to have you share with us these things, shall we say downers, whatever you want to call it, whatever, but the hard lessons of life. Lessons.
I think they're meant to protect those that are getting into it, right?
Right.
Because eyes wide open, we know what it takes, and then we're not surprised. So I'm super excited. Let's dive in. What is the number one mistake that you have found that homesteaders make?
Well, I mean, we would agree there's probably dozens, but I think the most important one is having a real clear goal and mission, and both husband and wife being on the same page with what that looks like. Because if somebody's, in one place and somebody's in a different place, then there's going to be conflict. And so, everybody has to be in agreement.
So you need to be able to clearly define what your goal is. If all you want is to have a place in the country, you can put up you can pull in an RV or a trailer house and achieve your goal of having a place in the country. But if you want to have a fully operational homestead, we're talking animals, we're talking about growing food, we're talking about growing food for the animals, etc. There's a lot more to it. And the better you define what your goal is up front or your mission, it's a lot easier to define the individual steps or interim goals, how you're going to get there. Michal and I aren't super goal-oriented people, but one of the biggest mistakes we made was not fully embracing that idea of making sure we had clear goals in the very beginning. So we've kind of learned through the school of hard knocks.
I think you make an important point here is that there's no one right thing. And it's what you decide to do together that really matters. Whatever your team looks like, deciding what that is and clarifying.
Yeah.
And sometimes there takes some negotiation, because this mama wants goats. This daddy says, no.
Well, Well, he said no for a long time too.
I said no to goats for a long time.
Yeah. And, that's part of the key of this is, really prioritizing what those things are and then being flexible to revisit them constantly because it's ever morphing and changing. And what's important this week may not be as important in 2 weeks from now when you realize you've got a whole other issue you need to deal with that's more important than this one. So you are juggling priorities constantly. And so one of the things that we did back when we were first starting out, we've been doing this for a little over 10 years. So in the beginning, we were traveling back and forth. And so we would use our driving time to and from to look at our list of what needed to be done, what our goals were, and prioritizing, okay, we had a major problem come up this week, which trumps all those other things we thought we were going to do next week. And now this is the priority. And what do we have to get in order to make that happen when we come back? And so, it's just a constant juggling act. And that's a tough one for people who are not organized. But you have to be detailed, organized, or at least have the ability to take good notes, write lots of things down.
Yeah. So, if you communicate enough, you can generally come to an agreement. But sometimes people will have in their head what they think is important. And then if they were interrogated or asked questions about it, they might decide it wasn't as important. So we occasionally use the technique that I learned in a management school many years ago. If you just write all the things down on a list that you think might be priorities, and then you compare number 1 to number 2, which one's more important? Number 1 to 3, number 1 to 4, and then work your way down the list where you've compared everything. You can put a check mark. When you get done, you end up with a list of the one with the most check marks is the most important thing to us. And it takes all the emotion out of it and makes it easier to prioritize. Okay, so the second thing that can be done wrong is overlooking the basics. So, this is going to sound like almost a rehash of the first bullet point, but if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. So one example of that, when the year we decided we would start raising pigs. So I got the pigs house built. I got the storage built for the feed, but I didn't have all of the pens, the fencing completed before we brought the pigs
Before
home.
I found the pigs. And then I found the pigs.
She found the pigs, so it's kind of like, we got to get them now. And so we literally brought them home in a freezing rainstorm, and I had no fencing and no way of getting these 4 little pigs or 2 little pigs off of the trailer without them just taking off into the woods. So I had to quickly throw up some cattle panels and so forth to corral them, and I literally had to build a fence in the freezing rain in 10 minutes.
But on the flip side of that, our second batch of pigs, we had everything all established. But what we didn't realize is that one of those pigs was so small, she kept popping through the fence. And so she would just walk right through the cattle panel. And so in the nighttime, and it wasn't raining, but it was freezing cold that night too, we were double doing the panels to make the squares smaller.
Putting up more fencing to make the squares smaller. So
meanwhile, chasing her back into the pen. So, you can do your best, but you're still going to have issues that you're going to encounter even when you try. So,
and I think that's a great point to make is nothing is going to go as planned. And that's one thing I've learned in my life is very little has gone as planned. And so
because he's been married to me.
Well, there may be a little truth to that, but we kind of have to go in with that mindset that, okay, we're going to do the best we can and we're going to think of everything we can, but along the way, there's going to be bumps.
You don't know what you don't know. So there are things that you will learn as you go that you realize that this would have been helpful had I known it 6 hours ago. But yeah, that comes into the actual learning essential skills. And it's not always just skills like gardening or animal keeping. It's a little of everything. Depending on what your goals are, and that's the key is what's the goal of your homestead? Because like he said, if the goal of the homestead is a place to just get away from the world and just have a retreat, then that's a different set of skill set that you need to have. But if you're gearing to, be self-sustaining, that's a whole other skill set, and it's multifaceted. So, learning that and acquiring those skills.
Learning those skills are part of not overlooking the basics.
Yeah.
Because nobody has the skills to do everything. So Michelle took a master gardener class. We try and teach each other, the people in our homestead group. And so we have classes all the time. We visit other farms. We learn from people that are already doing it, how to do it. So when we started goats, we got someone that was an expert, and she came and spent time with us and taught us a lot before we ever started.
Yeah.
So.
And YouTube is really where we learned. I particularly learned so much. I can't tell you how many hours I would just research things, because I wanted to try to avoid as many downfalls as possible. Doesn't mean you're going to miss them all, but I could at least miss some of the big ones. And, and then you even run into the fact that YouTube itself is going to give you 13 opinions on the same thing. So then you have to kind of break it down to what works for you. But it's a good place to start. And that we don't have our ancestors sitting here around the table telling us how to do these things. We're on our own. So YouTube is very helpful.
But you can also buy books. I know that's a foreign concept to some people, but even though I work in the technology field, there may be a day when we can't get on the internet anymore.
Yeah.
So she does her research on the internet. I buy books. And so, she's always telling me, you've got too many books. You don't need to buy anymore. But
we don't have any more room.
Right.
But so we've got a book on just about every skill that you can.
Yeah, I'm standing up for you, Dennis. We need books, like books.
Yeah.
Books are going to be gold. Books.
Oh
That's
yeah.
right.
What a great team. What a great team. I mean, different ways of learning and pulling as much information. So way to be.
Yeah. And that's really a good thing about how we work well together. We understand each other's strengths and our weaknesses, and how to build each other up and understand it's time for us to jump in if the other one is feeling buried. So that's helpful.
The third thing that you can do wrong, and we've done plenty of this, and Michelle kind of boiled this into comparing your homestead to an Instagram post. You see something on Instagram,
Unrealistic.
Look at that. That's what I want. Well, it's never quite like that.
Yeah, I like those Instagram posts where they have, this is what the goal was and this is what you came out with, and it's like such a far cry. Nobody can even recognize this is what you looked like or what you were shooting for. And that's kind of what homesteading is, because in your head you have this grandiose idea of this beautiful rolling hills and all the animals being at peace and the garden just flourishing and the sun shining, and it's like, yeah, I may get that a couple days out of a month, but I don't generally have that. It's usually a lot more chaotic than that. So,
Okay, one of the things I think they don't show on Instagram is how much your body hurts by the end of the day and you fall into bed, and how tired you are, no matter what the picture looks like.
that's for sure.
It is hard work.
But
People
it
don't-
feels so good.
People that have trouble sleeping, I'm like, just come visit me at the ranch for a week. I will take care of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I will make this a short story, but my daughter and her husband came out and were going to help us get ready for a family reunion. And so we were out there running the wood chipping machine and feeding it and, clearing out part of the forest. And after a couple hours, and my son-in-law, big muscles all over, and he's like, man, I'm dying. He said, do you do this every day? And I said, yeah, every day.
Yep.
It's true. You want to be part of John's toughness program? Yeah, he's always saying, come on, Kylie, this is our toughness program. And I'm like, your toughness program. I want some ease, but it is this kind of life. You work hard and you have to be out there no matter what the weather, and it's hard work.
And it's messy. It's messy. People who, post these beautiful Instagram posts just don't live in the world that we live in, where, you have mud and dirt and grime all over you. And it's just the way it goes.
Yeah,
So
it's like, well, I can feed animals, but you also have to take away what the animals produce after they've been fed
Oh yeah.
Exactly right.
every
Oh, yeah.
day.
yeah.
Yep. Yep.
All
Yeah,
part of
and
the package.
we've definitely had some setbacks with what our anticipations were with things that we weren't planning on when we had power outages and we lost all the food in freezers, and we've had catastrophes with just Mother Nature coming in. We call it Snowmageddon, that hit years ago, that broke branches and caused all kinds of havoc. And then, it took us 6 months to clean up from that storm, just the
Wow.
debris.
So we live in kind of looks like Colorado, even though we live in Texas. But huge pine trees, all kinds of different trees. It's just absolutely gorgeous. But along with those trees comes a lot of problems. When the trees are twice as tall as the power lines, if one falls over, you have no power.
Yeah.
Every time
Yeah.
there's wind or a rain and we're in the middle, we're way off the beaten path and there's no one really around us. So when our power goes out, they start with the most populated areas. So we're always
Sure.
the last man on the
Yeah.
totem pole. So, we had to find ways to work around that. And, and just learning that, even your estimation of, how to do things. We had a great plan on how to build our barn. We had a great plan. We thought we could do a barn building with our friends in one weekend, and that didn't happen.
Yeah. And so that first weekend we got
6 panels up. It's a metal barn. It's a metal arch barn, and it had
28 total.
28 total panel total hoop.
Arches,
we call
if
them
you will.
arches. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Like
we
a
got-
Quonset hut.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the
Exactly.
kind you have. Yeah.
But that's real tall on the sides. It's 8 foot on the sides, and so it was really tall on the sides.
Yeah, so we only got 6 done with 9 people helping us on the first weekend. By the
Oh, yeah.
And we thought we'd be
by
finished
the last weekend, Michelle and I were doing 7 panels, just the two
just
of
by
us.
the 2 of us. We figured
So-
it out.
So you need to constantly be open to new methods, new ways of doing things, and even though you may have finished a project, nothing stays completed forever, and so you have to go back and learn new methods because there's definitely better ways, and so there's been a lot of things that we've changed and went back. I'll give you one for instance. When butchering chickens. So this last weekend, was it last
2
weekend?
weekends.
2 weekends ago, we had 7. So we hatch a bunch of chickens, and then all the roosters we grow out till they're big enough to eat, and then we butcher them. Well, we used to butcher them the old way, plucking them and all that. And we've got machinery to do that to make it fast. But this last weekend, I didn't want to do it at all. And she's like, they have to be done because the crowing was driving her crazy. So she got on the internet and found a method of extracting the meat out of the bird without plucking them at all. And it was very quick. We did the 7 birds in less than 2 hours. So
Did you just deglove them?
Skinned them. Yeah. Skinned them and pulled the skin back, took the breast meat out and just took the legs and thighs and then tossed everything else.
But just the meat,
Yeah.
and the feathers stayed on the
so-
skin. And
Yeah. The best thing was I'm used to butchering turkeys because that's what we do every year, every fall is butcher our turkeys. And that cavity is so much bigger and the chickens are just not as easy to, get in there.
Right.
And so I wasn't looking forward to that. And so this was like the best answer because we could do all those birds and what time it would have taken us to maybe 2.
and I didn't have to set up all the plucking equipment and all the various
Yeah,
different
it was
stations.
super easy, super easy.
And
So
then clean them
now
all.
I'm not as afraid to do more raising more chickens. Because I was after this batch of chickens and I was like, I don't know if I want to do this again because I don't know what to do with all these roosters. But now I'm like, okay, we can do this, So,
Part of that learning process and being open to new ideas. So that's I think a critical key.
And sometimes part of that learning process is for somebody like me who I'm not going to kill anything. I'm just not going to do it. I know who to call and have it taken care of. That's part of the learning process. That's part of community,
It is.
right?
It is, and that
Yep.
is exactly right, because there's strengths and weaknesses within the community, and that's why we raise these animals, and I love caring for them. I mean, anybody who knows me knows I'm super nurturing. My animals are my babies, but I know exactly what their purpose is, and so when it comes time, I
And
don't
we've
have any
held,
trouble.
and we've passed, our learning on. We've held several classes on butchering rabbits and on butchering turkeys. So, and others that have other strengths will teach classes. So, sharing that knowledge with each other is real important.
See, I just wish I lived closer to you guys. No, I wish you lived closer to me. That's what.
So the fourth thing that big mistake that people make, and we make this one even still,
Yes.
even with all of our experiences, underestimating everything. So
Yeah.
it takes more time, it takes more money, it takes more strength. Things that I could do 10 years ago when I was 55, I can't do some of those today when I'm 65. And, our original goal was wait till I retired to build our retirement home and have our place in the country. But fortunately, we started 10 years prior to that. And I don't think we would have been able to accomplish as much had we not.
Yeah. Well, we would have had to hire more. Yeah. It was the Lord. He really led us into that, because we really didn't have a plan of even going this direction for at least 10 more years. And he just really woke me up one morning and said, it's time. So we're like, okay.
And then the last one that we had of things mistakes that you want to try and avoid is thinking you can do it all yourself. So, we're all proud people, and, I've got skills, look at me, I can do anything. Well, not so much anymore. So understanding our physical limitations, which as I get older, there's more of those, financial limitations, we all need help. And to the extent you can get help from others, you will survive this road a lot easier. Don't try and do everything yourself.
Again, coming back to community, to drawing upon a large body of strengths and weaknesses, and everybody working together. That's really where it's at.
And that really is true. And that, that's one of those things, finding that community is hard to do, but it is very beneficial. But, I think part of that, is also being very mindful of not putting your family at risk by trying to do it yourself when you really can't. Because, we're a long ways from medical services out here. And we've had some instances where, thankfully, no, not life-threatening, but, it certainly woke us up to, okay, we hadn't really scoped out how far the hospital was or which hospital was even good. And, God really protected us, but, it's just good to keep very mindful of, those things. So
We've had a number of accidents. We're fairly accident free in the 10 years. I split a finger,
cutting a tree.
Yeah. I was cutting a tree down and a dog ran over, and I took my eyes off of what I was doing to holler at the dog to get out because it was about to drop this tree on it. And when I looked back, it was too late. The tree had already come down, and it popped up and came down on my finger, and it popped it like stepping on a grape. Michelle's been bitten twice by copperheads.
And then I broke my arm.
And she broke her arm. We had a friend cut one of his fingers off in our log splitter.
Luckily, that was not our fault. It wasn't on our property. He just borrowed it. But it was one of those things where it was like, we're always mindful that, chainsaw accidents, we're using chainsaws all the time. And so, there's just so many things that can be dangerous.
I've cut through the jeans and my boots with the chainsaw.
Yeah.
So fortunately, I still have all those body parts. But the problem that you get into in this topic, thinking you can do it all yourself, is maybe when you first start a project, you have enough energy, strength, stamina to be careful. But as you go through that project, it might be an hour, 2 hours, might be 10 hours, you don't have as much strength as you did when you started. and you're a little bit weaker, you're a little bit
Less sharp.
less paying attention, and that's when you really end up getting hurt. And so, if you will take that into consideration when you start, instead of, okay, I'm going to work until the sun goes down. No, how about working until you recognize that you're slowing down and your reaction times are slower and you're getting unsafe. So,
And stop being stubborn about
Yeah.
it, right?
That is really good counsel, and I've found that as I've aged that I do much better by doing bites at a time, small steady steps we call them, and
amen.
not trying to tackle the whole thing at once, but be content to let it just take as many steps as it needs to, so that we can do it safely and so that we just don't fatigue ourselves and get frustrated with it.
But I
Yeah.
personally
And-
haven't
and-
learned that lesson.
And then knowing when to call for help. So, because that is important, and that's the good thing about the community that we have out here, that the Lord's really knit our hearts with people. And the interesting thing about this community is, I was talking to Dennis this morning. I said, when we first started this, we had these grandiose plans of we were going to bring our friends from the city, and they were going to all have places out here, and we were going to make our own little community of individuals that, they didn't have the same dream we did, but they wanted to be a part of a piece of it. But the reality is they were just never going to come out here. It just didn't ever work out. But God showed me that the unintentional community was so much richer, because these people were already here. They're already in the same mindset. And so there was no having to explain why we were doing what we were doing. We were all on the same page. And so that was just a tremendous blessing.
Yes, that is amazing. And it's fun when it all comes together like that. And everybody's just working like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, but with
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
well-oiled machine, they have personalities. And sometimes you just have to love them in spite of their personality. That's what you do with me, right? You love me in spite of my
I do love you.
personality. But nothing is perfect, right? But you guys have created this beautiful community, but it has taken a lot of work. I read your newsletters all the time, and you work hard and intentionally to create this community and to keep it strong.
Yeah, and it takes more than just a couple people to do that. We've got, a handful of what I would call the most involved behind the scenes individuals who really are the heart of making sure that this runs well. And, it's a group effort, and, it wouldn't happen without the group. So.
Yeah. It's so amazing how many things we've learned from other people in the group, and things that we've been able to teach them, so every one of us in that group are better off for the association we have with one another. And it's just like a giant family. I mean,
Yeah.
Our actual real family is hours away, or our son and his family is the other side of the world. So it's real nice having family that's right here near.
That's awesome.
That is so awesome. So summing this all up, is there anything else that you would like to tell our audience or warn them about things to avoid on the homestead?
Besides really doing a good amount of research about all the details you need to in planning well, praying a lot and seeking the Lord, because he's going to oversee and help you navigate things. I mean, I look back to how we even chose where we are, and I think, he was so gracious to put us in a position before I realized how lucky we are to have, for, just for instance, we have sugar sand here, which is very easy to work with. We don't have hard clay or rocks. Now, it doesn't hold nutrients, but I have plenty of animals that produce nutrients for me, and we have plenty of wood chips. So we make our own wonderful soil, but he's putting in fence posts, which wouldn't be nearly as easy if we were in a different land. And so it's little things like that I go, thank you, Jesus. You were so gracious to, help us when we were so blind, we had no idea what we were doing.
Well, and it seems to me that you have fun doing this. And there's the old saying that if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.
Absolutely.
So you seem like you're doing it right, and you're having fun with it. Not that there aren't challenges, but but you're having fun, and it's building that dream that's so important to you.
And give yourself grace to mess up and to cry, because I'm not a crier, but there have been some times that I have cried some tears, and that is outside my character. But you know, you're like, you look at each other and you go, what have we done?
The first 3 or 4 years out here,
Oh,
Michelle was constantly saying, "Are we crazy?"
yeah. It was so hard. It was so hard in the beginning. So
You know, we had we bought 30 acres of nothing but woods. The only thing that lived here were wild animals.
yeah.
And so, you know, you're trying to cut down trees and make a road. I mean, you know, the place where we built our house, we couldn't even get to. We literally had to crawl on our bellies through the
woods.
underbrush to measure the distance between the trees to see if the spot is going to be big enough to put the house, you know, that kind of thing. So we absolutely love it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Michelle milks goats and she makes cheese. And of course we have milk and cheese and, you know, ice cream and all kinds of things that she makes out of that, you know, which I love to eat. You can probably tell. So, you know, that's kind of a benefit.
It's a blessed life.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing this with you. I mean, there's some really important things to consider. I know that I can tell you that our little homestead, which is nowhere near as grand and expansive as yours is, it's been challenging. It's been hard. It's hard work. And it has just pushed me to the very edge of what I can do. But I can also tell you that I have experienced more joy and more peace.
Mhm.
And I mean, I love being out there. There is something so beautiful about watching life, right? You're watching those chickens, you're watching those rabbits. You're part of God's beautiful creations. And when you're out there and you pick a peach off a tree and you eat it, or the raspberries, you know, it's so different. It's such a different life. So while it's super important to consider, is this really for me? I think we need to look at both sides. And yes, today we were focused on the things you want to avoid, but there is so much amazing beauty and
Peace
yes,
and satisfaction.
yeah. And there's so much about being self-reliant, right? That when you produced all the food on your table and you get to sit down to eat dinner, that is an amazing feeling.
Yep.
And I wouldn't miss that for the world.
Well, thank you again, Dennis and Michal. You've imparted tremendous wisdom and shared some very important things for anyone who's embarking on a project like that. And now the question of the day for our audience. We want to bring Dennis and Michal back again. Do you have some topics that you would like addressed on how to homestead? Some things, whether it's things not to do, things to do.
Some basics, like how about the cheese? How to make a really good goat
Sure,
cheese?
yeah,
Or
any
some
of
of that
that.
kind of stuff.
So
Yeah.
put that in the comments and let's talk about it. And thank you for being part of the solution.